What is going on, guys? Jason Burke here, Styles Clash for Life, coming at you on YouTube, and today I've got some football focus. The NFL draft is only a few weeks away, and I am in full draft mode. Free agency has died down now. The first week or so was big for the Steelers. Lots of move, lots of depth pieces, couple re-signings. Pittsburgh is staying busy, and they're showing themselves that they are beefing up in the trenches. They are getting turnover guys on defense. They're getting physical thumpers on defense. We're seeing a lot of linebacker additions, physical corner additions. We're seeing offensive line additions. This has been a very fruitful offseason so far for the Pittsburgh Steelers overall. But before I bring you guys my actual mock drafts, I did 3 separate mock drafts where I focused the major rounds on all the different big positions of need that we have. Talking about O-tackle, talking cornerback, talking inside linebacker, stuff like that. Before I give you guys my multiple mock drafts, which I will do before the draft, I wanted to bring you guys a couple of pieces talking about some of the more controversial active conversations we've heard in the Steelers draft room lately. There's always these rumors about should the Steelers draft this guy or that guy, and you go, I don't even understand where this came from. I don't know if it's a fit. I don't know if it's a need. And there's all these controversial people coming up. Well, last week we let Terrell Edmunds walk. We didn't re-sign him, and he went off to join Philadelphia. And the conversation was, should the Steelers draft Brian Branch? There's pros and cons to drafting a safety that early in the draft when you have other needs. But I broke down the pros and cons of what he could add and what would be a negative for us drafting him. That video is on my channel. It's the last video I posted. It did very well, so I wanted to do another video posing another controversial hypothetical situation, asking this time about somebody that I have more of a definitive opinion on, and that is Kenny Pickett's former Pitt teammate, wide receiver Jordan Addison. There have been so many really pro-Jordan Addison people out there saying the Steelers should draft a wide receiver in the first round. Now, to me, that always speaks as a luxury pick. I feel like Pittsburgh, number one, we're known for finding ways to make do with our receivers and for drafting good mid-round and kind of like mid-level college guys. We find a lot of mid-round draft steals at wide receiver. Pittsburgh is really good at coaching up several positions, and one of the big things is wide receiver. Pittsburgh always coaches up wide receivers and makes the most of what they find. But drafting a first-round wide receiver seems like a really bold proclamation, and there are some really big people that are in favor of it. So before I get into whether it's a good or bad move, I want to talk about the guys we currently have on the roster. Pittsburgh has 5 wide receivers currently under contract, with the 6th one who played here last year who we could bring back. So we have 5 wide receivers with a potential 6th already on the roster. That is the amount of receivers you want to bring back at the start of the regular season. When you're putting your roster together after preseason, you want to have 5 and potentially 6 wide receivers on your roster. That is what we currently have. Now, the starting wide receivers, George Pickens and Deontay Johnson. Deontay Johnson now has played 4 years for the Steelers, and he's got almost 4,000 receiving yards. I think he has 3,600 receiving yards in that time. He's been our wide receiver 1 for the last couple of years with some young guys in and out of the fold. And George Pickens was our big draft pick last year in the 2nd round, coming from Georgia, coming off an injury, but was a big body guy. So you look at those 2 guys as your starting receivers, right? George Pickens, I think he had 800 yards last year, maybe 790 or something like that, somewhere around the mid-7 to early 800-yard season last year, and showed me immediately, even with the lack of targets that he got last year, showed me that in spite of this system and in spite of the way he was used last year, drastically underused in my opinion, I said every single week in my reviews, get George Pickens the ball. This guy with body positioning, physicality, being able to go up for contested catches, being a hands catch guy, using the sidelines, knowing how to toe tap. This guy has all the tools to be just a big play dynamic monster. We saw some of the best catches we've seen from a rookie in Steelers history last year. This guy was getting like 3 or 4 targets a game and would still come down with 2 big catches and a pass interference. He was drawing flags, he was drawing opportunities, and he was one of the best combat catchers last year, in my opinion, in the entire league. This guy just has a presence around the ball. He has good hands. He can catch into his body or away from his body. He can catch difficult stuff on the sidelines. We saw him falling down, fading out of bounds with a one-handed overhead catch last year against the Browns on a Thursday night game. It was one of the craziest catches I ever saw. It was very Odell Beckham-esque. in his prime. But George Pickens has shown us that he can definitely be wide receiver one. He gelled with Pickett when Pickett got in there, and things, it took a while to open up between Trubisky going to Pickett, then Pickett getting concussed, Trubisky getting back in, then Pickett getting back in. We had problems with the running early in the season. The line wasn't very good. Pickens wasn't getting time. He wasn't getting targets. The play calling wasn't good. But in the second half of the season, we started to gel. And while he still didn't get enough targets, he showed us that he can be a superstar wide receiver in this league. In my opinion, the likes of a Jamar Chase or a Devontae Smith, guys like that. So I think he's going to be your obvious move to number one next year. Deontay Johnson has more probably kind of rocky road than anybody in the NFL right now as far as ups and downs, highs and lows. Deontay Johnson finished, I think he was the receiving leader last year as far as yardage, 800 plus yards. No touchdowns though. No touchdown season was very, very interesting for Deontay, who's used to getting touchdowns. Now, he's a guy that can create the big play. He can get downfield for you, and he can get in the open field for you. He's very fast, and he has quick feet. And so he can make big plays. And he can make some pretty incredible catches at times. There are times at the start of the last two seasons that he's made some really, really incredible corner of the end zone catches, sideline catches. Deontay at times can have really flashy good hands. And then at different points in the last 3 years now, 3 of his 4 years in the NFL, he's been talked about as one of the drops leaders. Last year he had on different websites listed as between 6 and 8 drops. The league lead was 7. So if he had 8, he led the league. If he had 7, he tied. If he had 6, he was 1 below the lead. But he's been up or around the league leaders in drops for the last 3 seasons now. And that is, like I said, starting the last 2 years, he didn't have any drops in the first, half or 3 quarters of the season, and then really imploded toward the end of the last 2 years. So Deontay, it doesn't matter how good your feet are, how good of a route runner you are. If you can't catch the ball, you're not useful for anybody. So that is the number one thing that he has and has needed to get better at. And Deontay has wide receiver one potential. Again, with the break tackling, open field ability, with his quick feet, he's one of the better route runners in the NFL. He's been our best separation guy, getting away from defenders and getting himself open out of the entire team for the last several years. He's very, very good at getting open and getting off the defender quickly. But again, it comes down to catching. Can he catch the ball? He seems to make the tough catches and drop some of the easy ones, including stuff in the end zone. He dropped a couple touchdown opportunities last year, dropped a 2-point conversion last year. He's dropped some big things, and he's also, I think in his 4 years now, got 10 fumbles. That's an issue as well. That's a bit of an alarming thing for a guy who gets in the open field a lot. You don't want fumbles, especially when you have a younger offense now with coming into a second-year quarterback. You've got to be able to bail that quarterback out and not put yourself in turnover situations to not make the defense have to win you the game all the time. So Deontay's got some pretty big holes in his game, but again, when it comes to the intangibles, when it comes to the footwork, when it comes to the separation, when it comes to the route running, when it comes to the speed and playmaking ability and break tackle ability, Deontay's one of the best, but he has yet to put it together. Having only one 1,000-yard season out of his first 4, that was an 1,100-yard year in 2021, but he has to really put it together as far as catching the ball and holding the ball. That's really important, but he does have enough tools and experience on this team to be the wide receiver 2 next year. After that, we start getting into the questionables, right? So Calvin Austin, the guy that I'm most excited about to see next season out of anybody. He's an addition by subtraction, essentially. He's an addition without adding a new piece. We drafted him in the 4th round, 2 rounds after Pickens last year, as the big standout guy from Memphis, who actually set the record for the fastest 40, and then there was some controversy. The NFL messed up the record or whatever, but still ran a very, very high, or very, very low, I should say, 4.340, pretty much in the 4.2. He's the fastest receiver in college last year. Sauce Gardner, who's the Jets' Defensive Rookie of the Year, All-Pro corner, one of the best corners in the league already in his rookie season, said that Calvin Austin was the fastest guy he ever played against and was the hardest receiving matchup he had in his college career. This is an NFL All-Pro talking now. I think Calvin Austin, and when he played in camp for us last year, he was making plays. He was getting in the open field. He was catching bombs. We saw him scoring on guys. We saw him fighting TJ Watt. He was getting into fights. He's a small guy, but he's so quick. He's a good combat catcher. He's more physical than you think he is, and he's willing to fight. He's a Pittsburgh Steeler through and through. He's got the speed, but he's got underrated power as well. And again, being that fast and that dynamic makes you a really one to watch. So he was one of the camp standouts. He and Pickens were doing incredible things in camp, and then he got the Liz Frank injury on his foot. So he missed the entire season last year, missed a lot of time, was going to come back in, wound up getting reactivating the injury, wound up missing the entire season, has not played it down in the NFL yet. So while he's got potential as one of the fastest receivers in college history, honestly, and for what he showed us in camp, he can be something special. But we have not seen it yet at the NFL level, so there is cause to pause. There's a reason to think. Now, we saw that we just lost Steven Sims. Steven Sims was our reliable return guy. He was our jet sweep guy. He became our slot receiver at the end of the season last year, and that is the exact kind of player Calvin Austin can be. Steven Sims has more experience, obviously, as an underrated player, but Calvin Austin can be better than that. He's younger, faster, arguably more athletic. He just doesn't have the NFL body of work to show yet. And a foot injury for a speed guy obviously can be alarming. Now, all that's been said is that he's gotten healthy in the last month, and we are excited to see him. And I personally cannot wait. I love this guy, and it's like we've already drafted a rookie, right? Because we drafted him last year, but he didn't play last year. The NFL has not seen him yet. So he's coming out with that mystique that no one knows how to scout yet. He is a rookie this year for us. So drafting another guy kind of puts points against a guy like Jordan Addison. So I'm excited to see what Calvin Austin can do. I think the jet sweeps, the returns, and the slot stuff can really be good. Now, Steven Sims only wound up with like 130 yards receiving last year. He was not a big receiving threat, right? But he did make some important catches. He did make some third down slot catches, had a couple contested over the middle, and had some really nice jet sweep stuff, which Canada loves. Now, can Calvin Austin do those things? If he's healthy, 1,000% yes, I have no doubt. But the health is a concern. The fourth guy on the roster, Anthony Miller, played for 3 years in the NFL from 2018 to 2020 and totaled over 1,500 yards and 11 touchdowns in that time. In the last 2 seasons, though, in playing for Houston and Pittsburgh and bouncing back and forth on our practice squad from being here to being cut, he's only had, I think, 3 catches for 15 yards and 1 touchdown. That's been his entire career the last 2 years. He's proven under Mitch Trubisky in Chicago, he can have some really good seasons. Had a couple, 600-700 yard seasons. He's been a very good third receiver for them in the past. Has shown he can play multiple years at the NFL level and was a big part of Mitch Trubisky's Pro Bowl alternate season a couple years ago. Again, that was 2018 to 2020. He had 3 consecutive solid NFL seasons with 1,500 yards and 11 touchdowns. Now, the last 2 years, again, playing one for Houston, half a year for Houston, coming over to us, getting 1 catch here, then getting injured, going to the practice squad, getting cut again, being brought back last season and then getting hurt in preseason before he could ever play a down last year. He was being looked at as a possible 3rd or 4th receiver last year, especially once Calvin Austin went down, but then Anthony Miller went down and was cut and then just was brought back and signed to a futures deal recently. So we know he can play in the NFL level. We know he's got pretty good hands. We know he can make plays downfield and he's quick and it can be a deep threat. But can he be healthy is another question. He did those things for 3 years, but he's not done those for the last 2. Again, just 3 catches and 1 touchdown in the past 2 years on 2 teams. So there's questions there. But he does have the NFL pedigree where we know what he can bring us if he's healthy. One more, the final guy on the roster right now is Gunnar Olszewski. He's had ups and downs. He was brought in last year from the Patriots. He was an all-pro returner for the Patriots. Came in to be our return guy last year. Started in preseason decently with returns. Had a couple good plays. Wound up showing us a lot in preseason. A couple good jet sweeps. A couple good receiving things. The first 2 games of the preseason, he was our standout receiver. He was one of the biggest pleasant surprises of all of preseason last year. As a wide receiver, I saw him as a special teams guy. I didn't know he was going to be doing slot stuff last year. Started in preseason pretty well, then fumbled, didn't make a few good receiving decisions, was doing a lot of fair catching, made a couple bad decisions where we got bounces toward our end zone, and then I think he fumbled 2, maybe even 3 returns last year, so he got benched for Steven Sims, who then came in and stole the show as that third option last year for us. So it's kind of like, why do you have both guys? Gunnar Olszewski, again, is a proven NFL guy. He's been an all-pro as a returner before, but didn't play very well for us in the regular season. Showed glimpses of what he can do in preseason, and especially why he's an underrated blocker for a guy his size, and he's got underrated speed for a guy his age. So he can still do some things for us. He essentially is what Sims became last year, when Sims took over the spot. But again, Gunnar is getting older and did have a bad season last year in the regular season where he got benched as a returner. So what do you trust about him? We know he can catch the ball a little bit. We know he can do some stuff in our offense. Our offense is tailored to him, but can he make those plays consistently? And the final guy is Miles Boykin, a guy we signed off waivers last year from the Ravens, played 3 years in Baltimore. I think in 3 years, he only had 400 yards receiving. Came in here last year, couple catches in preseason. Mainly his usage is special teams. He is kind of the gunner on special teams, no pun intended, making tackles, or making a few tackles, but downing the ball, downing those punts inside the 10-yard line. He was a very valuable special teams piece, but he has not yet been re-signed in free agency, so he may come back, he may not. Either way, I don't think he's going to be more than a depth guy. He's a physical guy. He's got good body tools, but has not done much for us receiving, and really in the NFL has not done much. 400 yards in 3 years. Has not done much receiving in the NFL. Didn't do much in Baltimore, but is, again, a big body physical guy who can catch at times. He had a couple catches in preseason for us last year and showed that he can do that. So those are the guys we have. Now, it comes down, the biggest X factor in all of this, as far as what you trust, is can Calvin Austin be healthy? Because if Calvin Austin is as fast as he was in college and as good as he looked to be in camp last year before the injury, if he can come back and the injury is not going to affect him that much, he can be the third guy. Because again, we're not just talking about three options here. Deontay is going to get targets regardless. Pickens is going to be a star. Beyond that, you have Pat Freiermuth getting a lot of receptions. He's been great for us. Connor Hayward got a lot of catches toward the end of the year and showed a breakthrough in the last 4 or 5 weeks of the season. He's going to get targets. Zach Gentry will get the occasional target. Then you have two running backs in Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren. Warren especially as a receiver, but Najee is an underrated receiver too. They're going to get a couple screens. Jalen's going to be in the slot once in a while. Najee and Jalen are going to get targets too. So now you've got a guarantee of, Pickens, Freiermuth, Deontay, Jalen, Najee, Connor Hayward, some to Gentry. Pickett's going to sneak a little bit. How many balls you got on the field? Even if, for some reason, Miller and Austin don't come back from injury, Boykin gets signed somewhere else, Gunner's not super reliable, you still have all the targets you need, even with two main receivers. I think Calvin Austin's going to be good, and I hope that I'm right, but I think you have enough targets to go around, even without Austin at full effect for right now. But the talk is, okay, Cincinnati drafted Jamar Chase when they didn't really have to, right? They needed an offensive lineman. Wide receiver was a luxury pick. They already had Boyd. They already had T. Higgins. They didn't need another receiver, but they drafted another dynamic receiver who played with Burrow in college. Same thing for Philadelphia. They went out and they got Devontae Smith, who played with Jalen Hurts, in college. Same thing went and happened with Tua and them getting Waddle and then going and trading for Hill. Getting another weapon when you don't necessarily need one. Now, Miami did need one, and so did Philadelphia when they got A.J. Brown. But drafting another receiver when you don't really need one can put your offense over the top. We've seen what the addition of Jamar Chase has done for the Bengals. It took them from a fringe kind of a wild card team to an AFC favorite every year now because they have not only an extra playmaker when they didn't necessarily need one, but they got the familiarity of their college quarterback. It helps the quarterback come along to know the receiver, and the receiver knows routes he can run with the quarterback. They've practiced and played together for a long time. Jordan Addison played, before he transferred to USC, played at Pitt with Kenny Pickett. So you'd be bringing in a guy who's very similar to Deontay in terms of speed, route running, and breakaway ability, except he doesn't have the drop pedigree that Deontay has. So he's got the Deontay positives without some of those negatives so far. Knows Kenny Pickett from Pitt, and then also went to USC and played pretty well when he was featured at USC at a much bigger school against more NFL-ready competition. So he's got some NFL-ready stuff and a bit of more of an NFL scheme. So he's got a bit of, pedigree. You can argue that Quentin Johnson is the most physical receiver and has the most NFL-ready tools out of TCU. I think he does. Is it TCU for Quentin Johnson? Anyway, out of college, I think he is the most physical receiver that has the most physical tools. And if you look at, my opinion, Zay Flowers from Boston College, I think he's the best overall receiver in this draft. Certainly my favorite. The guy's a playmaker. He's got everything. and I think he's going to be drafted early as well. But you look at Zay Flowers being the best, most flashy, kind of in the most big play ability, Quentin Johnson being the most physical. You can argue Jordan Addison is the best overall receiver in this draft. He's not my personal favorite, but he's very, very good. And again, the familiarity is there. But do you really want to go with something like that when you've already got a guy in Deontay who you're paying, who's under contract and he's already a cap hit? So you're not drafting a guy that's similar to Deontay makes little sense to me, especially if there's not a lot of targets to go around. You've already got Pat, Pickens, and Deontay, and you could have Calvin Austin, who was a draft pick from last year, who could be one of the fastest guys in the NFL as long as he comes back healthy. So do you really want to draft a guy that you don't need there when you have a lot of things you need? Now, I didn't have a definitive opinion, really, when I did the video on Brian Branch, because I thought it was a luxury pick that we didn't need, and I was leaning toward not drafting Brian Branch because we need other stuff, and we have 2 starting safeties. We have 2 starting receivers with a potential dynamic number 3, and we already have a tight end and running backs who are going to get receptions. So I'm going to definitively say that I don't want a receiver in this draft. If we're going to draft an extra guy, if you're not sure you trust Calvin Austin, you bring in kind of that 4th-round speedster kind of guy, like a Tank Dell or someone like that. There's a couple of undersized speedsters who can make plays in those mid-rounds that Pittsburgh has success drafting in. I could see a Tank Dell or someone like that coming in mid-round. That would be okay for me if you're not sure about Calvin Austin like I am, like I hope to be. But I don't think drafting a first-round wide receiver is a luxury we can afford right now. I think we definitely need help at offensive tackle. I don't like our current starting offensive tackles. I want to draft a tackle early. We need an extra corner, whether it's a slot corner or whether it's an outside corner and you bump Peterson in or whatever you want to do. We need a slot corner for sure. We need some more help at the inside linebacker room, for sure. I don't think we have enough there right now. We have things we need in this draft. We need a D tackle, in my opinion. We don't have a pure nose tackle in the middle there that we can trust yet. Plus, we still need depth as far as outside linebacker. We haven't signed Bud Dupree yet, so you still need a 3rd outside linebacker. You still want someone that can back up Cam Hayward on the outside of the offensive line to get more depth there, and you still want to get a 3rd safety if you don't draft one in this draft because Edmonds is gone now, so you still want a 3rd safety for those looks. So we have a lot of things we need on this team right now, and I just don't think wide receiver, especially early, is something we need. I think Anthony Miller's got more than he's shown us so far, and I think Calvin Austin could be one of the surprises of the entire year this year in the NFL. So I'm going to lean toward not drafting Jordan Addison, but I do understand the familiarity and weapons aspect that could make us dynamic. If you can't protect him, if you can't protect Addison at the tackle spot, or Addison, if you can't protect Pickett at the tackle spot and you don't build your picket fence, then you're not going to have time to throw to Addison or anybody else. So that is my take. I would say no, but I want to hear from both sides. If you're pro receiver in the first round, or especially if you're pro Addison, like I've heard some people being, please tell me in the comments why that is. Talk about the pros of Addison. Talk about the cons of Addison. Talk about the things he does wrong and the things we need more in this draft as well. I want to hear from you on both sides of things. Do you think we need Jordan Addison or another receiver early in this draft? Or do you think we go with somebody late? Or do you feel good about Calvin Austin and Anthony Miller? Tell me in the comments below, and please like, share, and subscribe to this video. And again, check out the Brian Branch one from last week, and I've got a few more coming in the weeks to come before the draft. Come back here, and I will see you guys soon. Take care.